Strong Dads wants to thank 4Speed on 50 for sponsoring today's show. If you like classic cars, great food, and a taste of Americana, you have to visit 4Speed on 50's Diner, located on Route 50 in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Stop in today for a meal and an experience you won't soon forget at 4Speed on 50's Diner.
Well, hey, this is Carl Andry, and we got a little change up today. Both Merrill and I have been ill, and Merrill's got it worse than I do. So we were going to do a show today on money, and we've decided that I would go ahead and do it, and we're going to be talking about the pitfalls and things like that of money, and I'm just going to preface this with why it's so important that you take control of your money and how big an issue this is from my experience. So that's a wordy way of getting started here. But before we get really rolling, I want to thank Merrill's sponsors here for the Strong Dads. We got Quality Auto Mart. I want to thank them for their sponsorship. Casey's Outdoor Solutions. If you haven't used Casey, I highly recommend him. He's just this quality organization. And 4Speed on 50's Diner. I ate there here recently. I said that in a prior show. I had a great meal. But really appreciate those sponsors. If you get a chance, patronize them. So like I said, I'm Carl Andry. If you haven't seen me on here before, and Merrill is sick. And like I said previously, we were going to talk about money. And you might say, well, why do I have the right to speak into your life about that? Well, I want to tell you, for more than 20 years, nearly 25 years, my wife and I have taught Financial Peace University, which is Dave Ramsey's program. And we have worked with hundreds of couples. And on a couple basis and individual basis, we've seen it all. And the reason, I want to back up a little bit to tell you my background, the reason I teach financial peace and why I got into that was that over the years I was, I had made a lot of money, and I had been successful in the stock market at different times. All that led up to a time in my life in the mid-'90s where I had been watching for a particular investment. And I thought if it came about that I would act. And I did. And I'm going to tell you, I was stupid. Now, I did something most people don't do. I took an investment and multiplied it like 15, 20 times, which is really unusual. There's a saying in the stock market, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. So I always thought that if I had more money, I'd be happy. And I thought if I just had, when I started this run and this money started going up, and I went all in, I went from investing to gambling, but I went all in on this investment. And when I hit an extra 100,000, I thought I'd be happy. Well, and then I just thought, well, if I had another 100, then I could do this, that, and the other. So what ended up happening, I went another 100, another 100, another 100, and article breaks in the Wall Street Journal, and it was over. Now, I was so stupid. I didn't have a catch net. I didn't do anything like that. I didn't have a stop loss. I was completely on a high wire with no safety net. I was all in. The thing that was perplexing, though, was I was not happy. I wasn't happy with the money, and I definitely wasn't happy losing the money. And I've talked about that on previous shows. So for a year, I sat in a house. I'm not proud of that. I became a chain smoker. And I sorted my life out because, I had this idea of what money was supposed to do for me, and it didn't. And I think a lot of people have the wrong relationship with money. So that became something I needed to sort out. At the end of the year, I was up to 3 to 4 packs of Carlton cigarettes, sitting on my couch, just chain smoking. And I put those away, bought a brand new pack, threw it away, and said it's time to get on with my life. And there's a saying about never waste a pain. So if you've been through something in your life that you can help others with, share that. So I was looking for a way to do that when somebody at our church said, hey, have you ever heard of Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University? And this is going back 25 years ago. At that time, it was a pretty new program. It was still relatively new. Since then, tens of millions of people have gone through that program, and it's changed lives. So I looked at the program. I thought, this looks like a good package. It was put together well, and it was something that we could teach. So we started teaching, my wife and I. And like I said, I've seen it all. And what's so tragic to me about money is it's something that, we go to school and we don't ever talk about it. I mean, you learn all these other things. I did a lot of math in school. I've never had anybody ask me about, well, if Sally has two more apples than Pete and Pete has 5 as many apples as George, how many peaches does Billy have? Something like that. Never had a question like that, but I have had to deal with money and the management of money my whole life. And what we see is that people, even parents, don't really talk about money with their kids. So you see this generational thing where people are just broke. People are living check to check. And at the time of this recording, the default level on consumer debt on credit cards is at the same level it was during the Great Recession, which was the big calamity, financial calamity of our recent times. So there's a lot happening right now, especially. We're seeing record inflation. We're seeing what's going about. Personally, I believe we are in the midst of a housing collapse. We've seen these incredible values and things that people are doing, and people bought up as they go up. Some of that's starting to fall away. Some of it's actually starting to collapse. But people have leveraged that heavily. There's just, people are stressed out. One of the big things, though, is the belief. And I think what's so dangerous is today, there's a lot out there saying that you can't buy a house, a young couple starting out, inflation's so bad and everything like that. Now, I am not saying it's not. But what I will say is what you argue for are your beliefs. That will become the reality. The reality is that right now there will be a lot of millionaires made starting out right now. There will always be people who see these things out there and understand how money works, and they will take steps and they will advance, and we will see another crop of that. Right in the midst of where most people are saying you can't get ahead, you can't manage money, or make it go. But the problem isn't so much the lack of opportunity or these factors out there. It's really a lack of awareness about, again, how money works. Now, to give you an idea, over the course of the time, we've worked with, like I said, lots of couples. The most extreme example I can think of is a couple in their early 50s who came to see us for, basically their marriage was on the rocks. And we went through all their net worth, came up around $35,000 at 52 years of age. And I said, I've never asked, how much do you make? And the response was they had been making $250,000 a year or the equivalent for about 20 years. And they really had nothing. The other side of that is my wife's mother. That's just one example. She's one example. She lost her husband at 50 years of age, and she had 2 young girls still at home. Very small, I think $13,000 life insurance policy. So she still had to raise the 2 girls. She had house payment. She had the responsibilities that go along with being a mother and keeping a home. So she went to work. She basically made, and I'm not exaggerating, she made the equivalent or, over the years, minimum wage, working for a local hardware store. She paid off her house. She raised those 2 kids. She actually took in some of her kids later on in life when they had some trouble. She still had the same house, a place upstairs that they could stay, and she was extremely generous. Saved up about $250,000 between the time she was 50 and 65. So you look at that and say, how does somebody on minimum wage do that? And how does somebody making this kind of money over here end up broke? And a lot of it is it's the relationship we have with money and understanding how money works. So this is not, I'm going to tell you, this is not a program for somebody who's wealthy. And there are people, I'll tell you, there are people who are going to be maybe see this, who have far more money than I do, who have made piles and piles and piles of money in a relatively short period of time. So, it'd be interesting to have them here. A lot of those people own businesses, or they have something like that they've done. But this is really for the average person. Most people work for somebody. Most people have a retirement program there, or can have one, or can develop one on their own. Fewer and fewer people have pensions. But this is for the average person that's out there trying to make a living and get through. And we will be teaching Financial Peace here coming up in February, on February 23rd. If you're watching this show sometime in the future, this is 2025. But on February 23rd. I am going to be doing another financial piece, and I'll give you the information on that soon. But what I have found, and I'm going to talk about some general ideas here. What I found that the great tragedy is that people settle for what I call baubles and trinkets. In other words, because they don't really believe they can have their dreams, that they can have what they really want in life, they settle for baubles and trinkets. And that is they're little things. It could be cable TV. Early on, we found people when there were data plans for phones that were so exorbitant, people having $300 and $400 a month data plans for them and their kids. And it was just like, that's crazy amounts of money. You know, kids have to have a good phone and everything. Like cable was another one, a big one. The big one is eating out. There's just so much money that's gone into people eating out. They just don't realize how much they're spending that way. But what's happening there is the real tragedy is what I say is that they're settling for baubles and trinkets. In other words, they don't believe they can really get what they want, so they settle for these little things. And that's a shame, because you can truly, if you understand how money works and you have a plan, you can pretty much achieve what you're looking to achieve. Now, that's a big statement, but I'm going to tell you, I lived that. It is a reality. We didn't just teach it, we lived it. And we realized that the successes from that. So having a plan and telling your money what to do, which is Dave Ramsey's big statement, tell your money what to do, will make all the difference in the world. And all those things come into perspective once you understand the bigger picture. So on that note, I hate the word budget. I always managed my money well, but I hated the word budget because budget sounds so confining. It sounds so limiting. It sounded to me like, oh, I'll never have fun again. I'll never be able to enjoy anything again. I'll never have anything. I'll never be able to buy anything again. So a budget was so confining to me that I just couldn't get around the word. So what I found for me that worked, and it sounds like semantics, but I call it a dream machine. The way that we manage our money, my wife and I, is our dream machine. And when you think about a machine is a series of parts that come together, that work together in a certain way to produce a product, spits something out the backside. Okay, so you put material in here, stuff comes out the backside, a desired product. And all those pieces of that machine have to function in relationship with each other for it to work. When I saw that what people call a budget is really just a dream machine. In other words, if I get all the components in the right proportion and get them working together with each other well, then what comes out the backside is a desired product. So that made sense to me. And my wife and I set about, we used to use envelopes. I still recommend that. We'd sit down before anything happened and we'd decide where the money was going to go. How much are we going to allocate for this? How much are we going to allocate for that? How much we're going to for entertainment? How much for gas? How much for food? How much for, those kinds of things. And we each had our own little blow money that was ours to do with as we wanted. But we had these envelopes. And if the money wasn't in the envelope to do something, we just didn't do it. But we told our money ahead of time what we wanted to do. And we told it what we wanted out of it. We never had fancy cars. In fact, today I drove over here in a Ford Ranger pickup with 316,000 miles on it. We were just never big into cars. We looked at those as just money pits. So we more about transportation, and that's been a big factor in our accumulation of wealth, I believe. I know it is. And that's the fact we drove used cars. We found an elderly couple who bought great cars, and we just had a standing order with them that whenever they had a car, that's where most of our cars came from. We'd say, well, just buy it. There was no haggling, no nothing. We just stroked a check. And it worked out really well. We bought 3 or 4 cars from them. Each one of them, another truck I had from them as well, I put over 250,000 miles on. So we did not want fancy cars. We didn't eat out a lot. We realized that was a really big expenditure for a lot of people. But our dedication was, 1, to be debt-free, and 2, to take great vacations. We wanted experiences over stuff. So over the years, we've taken some great vacations. We've been to the dream spots that most people really only dream about, and we've gone to several of them. So we have those experiences that we wanted to invest in as far as allocating our money. So it wasn't about the baubles and trinkets things I was talking about. We never had cable TV for the longest time. We got a Fire Stick not too long ago because my wife has got a Prime account. But we didn't have cable. We didn't, it's like a lot of people look at that and go, wow, but it all was in proportion. You remember that machine I'm talking about? When you look at it and say, well, you can do whatever you want. And I tell people that all the time. Obviously, you're free to do whatever you want. If you want new cars, if that's an important thing to you, great. You're free to do that. Just understand how it affects the rest of the machine. Is it going to produce the desired result that you want, or has it got too big an aspect or too big a part in that machine to really function well? So we decided to have experiences over things. People don't, one of the things that I want to talk about, though, along that line is to get a better perspective. People don't really think about the long-term effects of little things that they're doing. And I know Starbucks is big. I love coffee. I am a coffee fiend. I drink a lot of coffee. But I rarely, unless we're traveling at the airport or something like that, I rarely stop and get a Starbucks coffee. I love their coffee. But, simple little things like that, when you put it into proportion, this is that baubles and trinkets thing. To give you an example, people don't think about the longer-term effect of that. So let's say that you're spending $5 a week, twice a week, on Starbucks coffee. I think it can be a lot more than that. I just drink the basic black coffee. Some of those drinks are far more than that. But let's just say you're stopping twice a week, spending $5. And instead of doing that, you put that money into an interest-bearing account or a little investment at 6%. We'll just say 6%. And you do that for the next 10 years, okay? Well, if you look at that, if you just take the money itself, it's around $5,200 that you've spent in 10 years. If you invested that into a 6% account, like I said, that's just the cash. A 6% account, you're looking at $7,300 in 10 years. Now you think, well, that's over 10 years. But you guys need to ask yourself, when you look at your habits in life, what are these things really adding up to? Is that what you want it to be about? So you take that same thing and say that you're 20 years old and you start that habit. Coffee never goes up. It's the same amount that you're doing, that you're looking at and saying, well, if I put that in there, and let's say that I cut out one meal a month that I'm eating out, let's say $60 we don't spend, and we throw that into the account, $105 every month. At the end of 40 years, you're looking at over $200,000. Now you look at that and go, that is far more than the average person has in retirement. Far more. If you look at what the average person has in retirement today at 60 years of age, it will scare you. And that's a major calamity coming. So many people have headed into and are heading into baby boomers and things. They're broke and they're going to be relying on Social Security. That is not really something we can trust completely because we all know that that's kind of running out. But people don't think about those little incremental things. The longer term, today it's $5. It's just $5. When we first got married, my wife and I, we'd go out to eat and take the kids and things. I didn't get coffee, maybe occasionally with my meal. The kids didn't get pop. You look at it and go, it's a lot of money. If you look at the bill, what they make on those things. So we would go out and we'd enjoy dinner, but we didn't add that onto it because, it's pennies that it costs, but they're charging you $2. So it didn't make any sense to us from the standpoint that was kind of an extravagance that was just something we didn't need. But we looked at it again. Our machine dictated why we were doing that. And I'll say this, if you don't have a plan, you will become very frustrated. What I see when we teach financial peace is that people come into the class and they just, one of them is more diligent or desirous of locking down the money, and the other one's kind of kicking against it. And they go along for a while, and there's just so much tension because there's no hope. Without that dream, without that thing on the backside, people get very discouraged. And what I've seen, and this is just my experience, when money's locked down too tight, women will tend to go out and they'll buy, this may sound chauvinistic or sexist, but they'll buy something for the house, a decoration or a dress or an outfit. A guy that gets very frustrated and goes along with the system for a while will one day show up with a bass boat and just blow the system completely apart because they look at it and say, it's not, I'm never going to have anything, because they don't have a plan that says, well, maybe not today, but in 3 or 4 years, we'll be able to do this. Okay, so that's why this is so important. It gives you an anchor some way to say it's not happening now, but it's going to happen. And if both of you have put together this plan and agreed on, if you're married, agreed on what you want, that's so important, because like the Bible says, a house divided cannot stand. So having a plan and having a realistic ability to achieve your dreams, the things you truly want. Is it the vacation to Hawaii? Is it, it's up for you to say. Maybe it is a brand new car for the first time in your life. But you need to have a vision, you need to have a plan, and you need to have hope. So you get that from having a dream machine. Now, will everything go right? No. It'll take you 2 or 3 years, maybe more, to iron it out. But if you are massaging that as you go along, factors will pop up. You can incorporate that in. I can't tell you how important this is. I just can't. It's the difference between contentment and just struggle. So many people, again, look at the statistics. They live check to check. They're in debt up to here. Their credit cards and I hope it's not you, but very good chance some of you listening to this would be, that a home equity line is picking up their slack, or they're consolidating there and going right back into debt. So that is one of the things that I look at and say, it's so vital. Get a plan. Put together your own dream machine, which, again, some people call budget. I think it's greater than that. One of the things that we talk about is debt is not your friend. And Dave Ramsey's really big on that. Now, I would say that some people would make arguments about there is good debt and bad debt. One thing I'll say that is irrefutable is credit card debt is deadly. And I've seen this time and time again. The record from our standpoint in class, we cut up credit cards. And we had asked one night, does anybody have any credit cards they want to cut up? And one couple had 54 credit cards. And I said, are these all active? Or were some of these canceled, or some of them that you got in the mail? No, they said they're all active, 54 credit cards. Now you may be thinking, whew, we're not that bad, so we're okay. No, credit card, if you're using a credit card consistently to pay for things because you don't have the money to pay for them, that you're just messing with fire. You're just messing with fire. So I would urge you, stop. Just make it a goal that if you don't have the cash, you're not doing it. So that takes us to the first things first kind of deal. Dave Ramsey, we're only going to talk about a few of the steps. And I strongly suggest you think about the class, because we can't cover everything here. We're not going to even try. But I'm going to talk about the basics. And the basics are have an emergency fund. So it's the thing he advocates. Put $1,000 or $2,000, depending on your income level, but put $1,000 or $2,000 away right away. Do whatever you can to put that money away so that you're not relying on the credit card. You're not relying on that being your emergency fund, because the interest rate on those credit cards today is staggering. And people always say, yeah, we pay it off and everything. That is, for the most part, not true. That's just a lie that people tell themselves, that they're flirting with something. If you don't have the money, it's an indicator something's wrong. And that credit card, if it picks up that slack long enough, you'll get behind eventually, most likely. So get an emergency fund, something that you can put back and be a buffer, okay? So $1,000 to $2,000. I'm going to tell you, we've seen this time and time again. Most people have that kind of stuff, that money, sitting around their house in just stuff. It might be Facebook Marketplace. You might take things to an auction. But maybe it's just for you, work an extra day, work some extra hours, do whatever you can. And I want to stress this. Do something short-term, intensely, that has long-term benefit. So in this respect, you're going to do whatever you need to do to get that emergency fund up, that cushion. Because I can tell you, once you have an emergency fund, it's sort of repellent. I think Dave brought this Murphy repellent. Having that money set aside for emergencies kind of is a buffer against those emergencies. It's always when you can't have it, when something is least likely, something you can absorb at that time, that something happens. So having that emergency fund is critical. Get that together. Do whatever you need to do to get that money saved up so that you have an emergency fund. So pocket that money, and then go after that debt. Do the debt snowball. Dave Ramsey's really big, and I'm very big on it from a psychological standpoint. You pick the lowest balance credit card or lowest balance debt and pay it off. Pay the minimums and everything else, but pay it off. And then take that money that was the minimum payment for that, roll it to the next thing, pay that off. And it has, people always say, well, what about my highest interest rate one? Or what about my greatest balance? This is psychologically, there's a win to it every time you knock off one of those small ones, and you snowball that money that you were paying on that one into the next one. And as that keeps rolling, it gets bigger and bigger because the payments, you're knocking out those minimum payments on things, and you can focus on the next one in line. So pay off your debt. Get out of debt, except for your house. And we're debt-free. We've paid our homes off. We've got some real estate on top of it, some land and things. We're debt-free. And I can tell you, there's a big debate on should you have your mortgage this rate and you got your investments at this rate. I'm just a believer, and I've experienced the freedom of being debt-free, the lack of that stress. So I'm with Ramsey on this. Pay off your debt. Initially, you're just going to pay off all your consumer debt, not your house. That'll come later. So those are the first two steps. And then the third step is back again to the emergency fund. Pocket, save away 3 to 6 months for an emergency fund. Now, I want to talk about what an emergency is. And this is where I see, if you take nothing else away from this is what takes people out. This is where their downfall really starts. Most people don't understand the true cost of living. So when we talk about an emergency, I'm very keen on this as far as what is an emergency. Well, people talk about, and I say, what if you get up in the morning and you come down to the kitchen and there's been a big rain the night before and the ceiling in your kitchen has collapsed because the roof has failed. The roof, you've been living in this house for 20 years and all of a sudden there's rain coming in, and the ceiling's collapsed. Now you got this big problem. Is that an emergency? Is the replacing of the roof an emergency? Well, it is in that moment, but it wasn't. And here's where people fall down. This is where I see it starts, and it gets so many people because they don't understand the true cost of living. You see, over that 20-year period, that roof was aging. You don't see it, but every day there's a bill. Every day there's a bill because the roof is aging, wear and tear is going on. So let's say it's just $500 a week or a month or whatever it is over that period of time. But that's kind of high. But over that period of time, every day, some dollars are going out that will need to be used to replace that roof. People don't allocate for that. So when we're talking about a dream machine, my wife and I have a dream machine. And it would be like one of those little envelopes or one of those little categories where you need car replacement, you need roof replacement or home repairs. There's things that are going to happen medically. So you need some money set, especially if you've got a large deductible. You've got these things that are out there on the horizon that are going to happen. A tire is going to blow out on the car. The transmission is going to go out. You're going to have a repair for that. You're going to have wear and tear like on the roof. There's things in your home, a dishwasher, things like that. But here's where most people fall down. They look at their bills and they go, look, I got a raise or whatever it is, or I've got $200 after we pay all of our utilities and pay our car payments and our house payment and everything like that. And we've got the kids are wearing clothes. We got food in the fridge. So, hey, we got an extra $300. We can buy a jet ski. Well, they don't really have an extra $300. They have these bills coming due down the road that they're not allowing for. So they don't understand the true cost of living. And if you don't allocate for that, if you don't have a plan, if you don't set money aside, like on a weekly or monthly basis for when those things happen, they pop up. And what happens is people are already spending all their money. They're spending all their money. They've bought the jet ski, or they've leveraged something else, or they've run their credit cards up on the baubles and trinkets and things. So what are they going to do? Well, they got to go get a home equity line, or they got to get a credit card to absorb that. And once you get into that, if you're already spending all your money and now you add another big payment onto that or another big expense, that starts this creep. And then what happens is they get another card or they do this, and then one day they take out a consolidation loan. But the problem is in the system itself. It's not you haven't addressed the problem. And the problem is you didn't allocate for the true cost of living. And that true cost of living are all these other things that can happen, and they will. They do. There's no getting around it. Things age, things break down, things wear out. You need to allocate for that. So when you're putting together your dream machine, there's got to be an allowance for the true cost of living. If you do these things that I'm talking about right here, if you get your emergency fund up, you pay off your consumer debt, everything except your house, and you save for an emergency fund for 3 to 6 months. And you got to determine what is an emergency fund, what truly is an emergency. And that's money you're going to put in some sort of savings account. You're not investing that in the market where you might lose it. You're going to put it somewhere safe, and it's only for emergencies. Not, oh, I got a hangnail. That's an emergency. No, and especially if you're married, you need to agree on what is an emergency. Now, ultimately, over the long haul, if you develop your dream machine or that budget, if you develop that well enough, when that transmission goes out, when that roof wears out and everything, that's already there. You take that money and you pay for it. That's a novel thing for a lot of people. I had a hard time, even though I was really good with money in my earlier years, I had a hard time spending money. So I was always kind of holding on to the money for a reason I didn't really understand. I just wanted more. Had a poor relationship with money. So when it came time to do something, then I'd feel guilty about spending it. And that's one thing when I went to the Dream Machine and said, we're setting aside monies for these different things, for the things that wear out, for entertainment, for whatever it is, for these expenses in life. Everything is in balance inside the machine. And by the way, we want to go to Hawaii. So we're going to start putting money away for Hawaii. We went to Israel. We've gone to Alaska. We've taken trips out west. We just took all of our kids and grandkids out west for 2 weeks. We set that money aside. We make a plan, and we set the money aside for that. And when it comes time to do that, see, we know that everything else is pretty much covered. And you can't be ready for everything, but we know everything else is pretty much covered. So when we get ready to go out west, it's not like, oh, can we really afford this? Or, what happens if the tire blows out or transmission blows up when we get back after we spent all the money on the vacation? Because we put all that on a credit card. That's what most people do. So when we get ready to take these trips, we go to the bank. There's no guilt. There's no like, oh, should this money, maybe we need this somewhere else, or should we spend this kind of money? Nope. We agreed on it. You go, you take the money out, and you go enjoy. I'm just trying to tell you, if you don't live this way, you probably are having a hard time relating to it. You might be saying, there's no way I could live that way. There's no way I could ever get to that position. Well, I'm telling you, you can. And I'm going to say this, very, very, very few, I can hardly think of anybody that came to me and said, well, that didn't make enough money to affect a great change in their life if they just managed the money well and they looked and had a plan. This is very realistic. We have helped hundreds of people throughout the years do this and live this kind of way. It is so liberating. I can't tell you how satisfying it is to be able to go to the bank and say, hey, we've set this money aside for a great vacation. We're taking it without any guilt. If you're out there and you're a parent and you're thinking about doing something, you don't know, for the most of you, you don't know if we spend money over here, will little Billy be able to have clothes for school? You feel like you're constantly, like there's something over here lurking around that you don't feel comfortable spending money in this area. You really can't enjoy it because you don't know. You don't have a plan. You're not preparing for these things, and these things keep popping up, like your home taxes, your property taxes, or your insurance premium on your car. It comes every year at the same time, pretty much. Oh, now I got this bill here, Nope, it was coming, so you feel constantly like you're not really able to enjoy your money, or what's around the corner kind of thing. Not a way to live. I'm just going to tell you, if you're diligent and you work out this dream machine, it's just that I don't have a word for it. I just invite you to try. Come to Financial Peace. Join the class that we're getting ready to do. I want to tell you a couple things, little truths for me. Realize there's no one meeting anywhere in the world to make your life better. And that's a hard thing for people. They always think there's someone or something out there that's maybe you're going to win the lottery. 25% of the people in this country think that the lottery is going to be their retirement. That is completely delusional. but there's nobody out there meeting to make your life better. And I will say this, there are plenty of people out there meeting to figure out a way to part you from your money. There are boardrooms full of people around the world trying to figure out how to market something, how to get you to buy something, how to get you to part with your money for something. The odds are against you. I always laugh when I hear people say, I walked onto a car lot, an established dealership or somebody here in the area, and boy, did I get them. No. You might have got a better deal during that time because there's a little overstock or whatever it is, but you're in their territory. If they've been around a while, they don't exist by not being good at what they do. You walk in once every 3 or 4 years to buy a car, you're in their territory. So don't kid yourself. You got to be very diligent. But there's nobody out there meeting to make your life better. It's up to you. You have to take responsibility for your life, for the plan and what you're going to do. I said it earlier, do something extraordinary in the short term to have long-term impact. So what we're talking about here is when you start going after your debt, maybe it'll be your house next. We recommend paying off your house after you start investing in your retirement, then go after your house. But you can do something in the short term that's extraordinary. It has long-term effect. You can accumulate wealth really quickly if you don't have any debt. It's pretty surprising how fast that can go, how much easier it is at that point. But we're talking about focused energy for a period of time. Maybe it's 3, 4, 5 years, and there's several people that we have counseled who have paid off a house or a huge amount of debt in a very short period of time. I will say this, if you make a decision to do that, it's like the world moves, forces move once you make that decision. It may seem insurmountable, but once you start making these decisions, I can tell you this with absolute confidence, how many times, it's just an untold number of times that they come up and said, you'll never believe what happened. Yeah, I do. Something they didn't see on the horizon has materialized to help them along the way. It happens all the time. So don't look at this mountain ahead of you and think, I'll never be able to climb it or get over it. Things happen. Just do something. Make a decision. We're getting out of debt. We're not doing this anymore. We're not living like this anymore. And make that decision, put together a plan, and I can help you, or if somebody can, you reach out. But we're going to put together a plan, and we're going after this. We're not living this way anymore. I want a better legacy for my kids. I can't tell you, too, how important it is if you go through this journey and you start making these changes to educate your children. I'm going to tell you another piece of mine is that our kids, we do not worry about them financially. They are going to be worth far more than my wife and I because they're already on the path. They're doing all the right things. They are going to have extraordinary lives unless, and God forbid, something happens. Nobody knows for certain what's going to happen in life, but they have all the earmarks and they're doing all the right things. And that was learned. Our daughter in particular, when we were teaching financial peace early on, we'd watch the videos in preparation for the class, and she was 13, 14 years old. She said, you mean if I start putting money in at 18, in my IRA, I can have as much money, and if I just contribute for like 10 years as somebody who starts 10 years later and gives their whole life. So she was watching. We said, yeah, if you start early, especially, it's a real benefit. So when she was in college, we made a deal with her. She worked extra hard. So she opened an IRA, and we told her, you put $1,000 in there, we'll match that. So even in college, she started saving for her retirement. Starting early is definitely beneficial, big benefit. But kids seeing this, teach your children, because what you don't want to do is leave this world and have your kids worry that your kids are going to be struggling. Now, again, there's no guarantees about life. Illness, calamity can strike. But the big thing that we see is most people, it's within their control. They have the ability to do better, and they're not. And it's generational. It has happened. There's stories I could tell you with parents that have come in and counseled with us that and their kids are going to be right behind them living the exact same way. And they would never want that for their kids. Their parents didn't want that for them, but they didn't teach them differently. So I just can't stress this enough. Raise up your kids with these kinds of things. One of the things I'd say as far as tips is kill pride. So many people, I think Ramsey again says that people are buying things with money they don't have, things that they can't afford to impress people who don't care. One of the books I'm going to say a little later about read. I'm a big believer in reading. Millionaire Next Door. It's 30 years old or whatever. It's a study of the average millionaire. They're not who you think they are. And most people who have achieved that, a lot of them, at least I'll say, they don't have the pride that a lot of people. They're not worried about driving a flashy car. The reality is once you can buy about any car, once you can walk into a dealership and pay cash for about any car, it's not really that important to have one anymore. It's sort of like, it's hard to explain. You'd be surprised how many people I know who are multimillionaires who shop at Goodwill. Now you think, well, that sounds really, they must really be, no, it's just practical. Why would they feel the need to go spend 4 or 5 or 10 times the amount on something that's perfectly fine? They need clothing and they look good. They're not buying junk. They're not buying, they're just being prudent, and they shop and they look for the bargains. So get rid of your pride. Pride is what keeps us keeping up with the Joneses, and the Joneses are broke. They're broke. One of the things I tell people right off when they first start with financial peace, if you want to feel wealthy, which is what we want from our money for the most part, we want to feel wealthy. We want to feel empowered or comfortable. The quickest way to do that is to give. So ahead of everything, start giving. Give something. Just give a little bit to start off with, but give. Be generous with what you can be generous with. I can't explain it to you, but there's something that happens in our psyche that when we are giving away some of it, it changes our whole perspective on it. We are to be generous, especially if you're a Christian. Give, tithe. I can't say that enough. I'll repeat it again if I need to. But just give a little bit, because that keeps us from becoming too wrapped up in ourselves. It just keeps us from losing perspective. Give. That's before you do anything else. Really, just start giving a little bit. People wonder about, as far as how to save. If you're looking for one of the things later on, you're going to put away 15% after you put together the 3 to 6 months of emergency fund. Save 15%. People are like, well, how am I going to do that? Well, most of you get cost of living raises. So one of the tricks I used over the years was when I got a cost of living raise, I didn't take any of that money. I just rolled it into the retirement account. Just roll it into the retirement account, and you eventually get up to your 15%. If you can't do that after you've paid off your debt, your consumer debt, and saved your emergency fund. So maybe you can't right away put 15% in. But the reality is for most of you is you're living already before you get your cost of living raise. So instead of taking that money and having it disappear at the end of the year and you're not knowing where it went, just say, I just want to put that 3% into my retirement account. That's one of the ways you might do that. So we've covered the basics on that. We've talked about some of the strategies. I want to tell you, we're going to do financial peace here starting on February 23rd. And I just want to ask you, if you're interested, you go to Bright, like the light Bright, BRIGHT. I'll repeat this later, but brightcc.org, and you can register for the class. It's on Sunday mornings at 10:45. It'll run for 10 weeks. It's about a 2-hour class, and the cost is $89. But I'll give you more details on that later. But that's something you might want to, we'll talk about here at the end. So real quick, I'm just going to do some of my tips. What we found personally is don't get stupid and speculate in the market. One of the things that I did, I made a lot of money. I accumulated money, and then I got stupid. For the average person watching this, if you just invest in an index fund, you'll be better off in the long run for the average person. Yeah, there are people out there who can play the market, people who have great insights, people who recognize opportunities, but for 90% of you or more, the best thing you can do is set it and forget it. Put it into some ETFs or index funds, something simple, spread it out, and just do that. Don't get smart and think, you might take a little bit of money, but maybe you take $1,000 and you play the market if you want to do that. But don't get, especially as you start to accumulate money, as the money starts to grow and get bigger and bigger, these temptations can get stronger and stronger. You start to believe yourself. You start to feel, look at this and everything like that. I'm just going to tell you, don't speculate. Don't get stupid with your money. look at it that way. One of the big factors for us, we drove used cars. I talked about that earlier. Find good used cars. Now, I have people that we have taught, have people in our class who have done really well. They buy new cars. I don't have anything against new cars, but for us, it was used cars. We didn't like putting a lot of money into something that lost value. Limit your eating out. Talked about that earlier. We drank water early on, especially. Now, I do drink my coffee with my meal today because, like Dave Ramsey says, if you live like no one else lives, you can live like no one else lives. Now, you might think, well, coffee's not really that big a deal. But it really was that incremental thing that we talked about earlier. When you look at it in the bigger scheme of things, whether it's coffee or eating out or some habit that you have that's costing you a few dollars here and there, like every week or every month, you can put that into perspective. But we didn't eat out that much. We just saw that as a big money. And for a lot of people, that is a huge one. Most people don't really have an idea how much they're spending eating out. And groceries are another area you should get diligent on. And try to come up with a plan. Maybe you sign up for a discount card, but consider, groceries is something we automatically seem to justify, but you can spend a whole lot of money. And if you walk into a grocery store with a credit card, they've shown that you can spend as much as 60% more than you intended to simply because you have that credit card. So groceries, it's sort of an expense that we think, well, we have to do this, but there's a lot of money that goes out in there. And that's one of those areas that you can look at and say, if we can cut out 10, 20% in this area, how much over a lifetime is that going to be? So groceries, you become savvy about that. I would say taxes too. I didn't have that on my list, but get a good accountant, because there are a lot of things from the tax standpoint. That's a big, big expense in our lives. And if you can minimize the taxes legally, you're wanting to do that legally, but that's a big area that can return good benefits. One of the things that we are very strong about, my wife and I, is do a balance sheet every year. This has been a key tool for us every year. Now, when you're starting out, it doesn't look like much. So you start out and you say, well, we're paying off this debt, and we've got this much money in savings or whatever it is. So it may be that there's only a little bit of difference there that first year. Now you've got the debt paid off and things like your house has started as far as your consumer debt, but your house is now, it's the equity's growing in that, the payments are coming down. That was the best encouragement because early on, especially, it doesn't feel like you're making a lot of progress. So what you do is you look at that and say, yeah, we are making progress. Now we'll tell you that if you keep it up, it does like this. It ramps up. That equity starts growing. The more money you get, the more money you save and accumulate, the more worth, it compounds far faster. So that kept us on track to say, hey, we're making a difference. It's happening. It's happening. It's happening. It's happening. It's really happening now. So every year we'd sit down and say, what is our balance sheet? What's the house worth? We use the same tools like Zillow or Kelley Blue Book for cars, and we didn't list all of the assets, but you can pretty well, if you do something consistent, you look at your accounts, your bank accounts, your retirement accounts, things like that, and you add all that up, and see what where it is, you subtract your liabilities from your assets so it was key. It was just a great way to keep us going forward. Because see, when I got married to my wife, I was broke. I had lost all my money. And she was recently divorced. We didn't have a lot of money. Some equity in the house and a small amount in the bank is what she had. And we started pretty much from scratch 25 years ago. And I'm going to tell you what you can do in 25 years. Most people would not really believe that. But really, in truth, if you look at some of these .com people and things, these young guys and young women who have gotten these businesses, they've made billions in that time. What's possible in that period of time, but you might be saying, well, nobody in my family's ever been a millionaire. Nobody in my family's ever had money. You can change that. I've given you the basics here. There's far more. I've given you the basics to change that. And you can change your family tree from you right now. You can teach your kids how to do the same thing, how they can be financially independent to where they're not at retirement age thinking they're going to have to live off Alpo. That's the reality for a lot of people. So balance sheet. We use the envelope system. I said that earlier. If it's money's not in that, you'd allocate all the money out into these little envelopes. I had a guy that worked for me that used coffee cans, and that story is a remarkable story. I won't tell it here. I don't have time. But he had used coffee cans and had done something incredible. Every time he got his check, he just put the money in each of these coffee cans. One was for cars, one was for house, one was for food. And if it wasn't in there, you were stuck. Now, yeah, you're going to say some months there's no money in the food thing. Well, probably you need to change one of the other coffee cans or one of the other envelopes and take a little money out of there because you're accumulating money in that one that you don't need and put it over here. But the envelope system, having it compartmentalized and allocated is so important. One of the things, too, we talked about this on a previous video. Ask for a raise. Most of you are not earning. Most people are not earning what they're really worth. I don't believe, like I said in the other video about how to ask for a raise, that you should ask for a raise simply because you breathed. Maybe cost of living. You should be doing more in order to be justifying an additional amount of money. But for most people, and it's not evil, the owner or the boss is trying to do the best job they can for the least amount of money to save the company the most amount of money so that they're not – so it's not that they're like, I'm just going to really abuse this person. No, if you're willing to work for this amount of money and that's good enough, they're not – it's like I said, there's no committee meeting to make your life better. I would say most of you probably could ask for a raise. If you know how to ask for a raise, I'd say go look at the video on that, how to ask for a raise. And there's a lot of other videos other than ours out there on that you can look at. But most people are not earning what they're worth, in my experience, I'll put it that way. Ask for a discount. One of the amazing things to me is that people will come into a garage sale and they'll say, we had this happen, we had these squirt guns, brand new squirt guns we'd used. We only used them one time for a game at Easter. So a whole box of them there, and we had them dime a piece. And some guy comes up and said, will you do 2 for a dime? Well, I understand when you get a discount, but that's just, there's a certain level. It's like, are you serious? I didn't sell them. But I'm amazed at how many people will do that at a garage sale, but will walk in and buy a high-ticket item and not bat an eye about asking for a discount. I could tell you story after story of things we've bought that I just said, hey, will you do this? And then I just shut my mouth. I'll say, we're paying cash. I'll tell them that because sometimes that plays into it, because if they got discounted for the credit card, that most people have, there's a fee they got to pay on that. But ask for a discount. And I'm not telling you. I think go to a garage sale and somebody's got a dime on something, pay a dime. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But it is shocking to me how many people walk in on big ticket items and don't negotiate. I look at it, everything's negotiable. Everything. And I like tires. I used to sit down with the phone book and I would call tire shops. And there's a place in Harrison I called up and I said, so I've got several here I'm looking at, several. I'm just going through the phone book. I'm looking for a deal. And they said, we don't negotiate. Well, I hung up. That was it. It's like no sense in talking to them. I appreciate that. That's their call. But I know somebody will. I know somebody wants the business, and somebody will sell me the exact same tires that they've got. And if I look hard enough, they'll probably sell them to me at a pretty good discount. So I negotiate everything, especially on big ticket items. Negotiate. So. Put your money to work. One of the mistakes my wife and I made is at different times we had too much cash sitting in a very low interest bearing account when there were options. There's not always been options. We're at a good time right now at the time of this video here in January, in January 2025. Interest rates are higher on savings accounts than they have been for a lot of years, but we had money sitting on the side. You really want to get your money working for you as much as you can. So don't accept some low interest rate when you don't have to. It's interesting. I had this, I'm on the township board, and I had a difficult time getting the township trustee to move the money out of this really, really minimal, like 0.01 interest account to another institution within the purview of the township that would pay them an interest. So in the end, in the last year, that was about $20,000 difference on that money as opposed to where it was. That's the kind of thing that you look at and say, that's money you're just leaving on the table. We made that mistake at different times. We had too much cash sitting in places that just didn't really pay as well as they could have. You should be a good steward. So looking back, it didn't break us or anything like that. But, you look at how much money we might have left on the table. We made some mistakes, but I look at that today, there are options. So get your money working for you. The last thing I'm going to say, and I could keep going for hours, I really could, is read. Read. Get smart. Ignorance is expensive. Read. I can't stress that enough. And find people. I'm not saying sally up to people who are wealthy simply because they're wealthy. But if you're looking at your friends, most of your friends, if you're comparing and living like they're living, most of them are broke most likely. And you'll be the sum total of your 5 best friends for the most part. So you look at that and say, you need outside counsel, wise counsel. But the easiest way to do that is read. I said earlier, I recommend a book called The Millionaire Next Door. There's also a follow-up to that called The Millionaire Mind. I would say read Dave Ramsey's books, like Total Money Makeover. Read his books. There's a great source there. And there are other books they recommend for different areas of life that are tied to great books. Read. The first book that changed my life, and if I had just followed one of the principles in there, I wouldn't have speculated like I did. That's where I went rails off on one of the 10 rules, was Clayson's book, The Richest Man in Babylon. I was 18 years old when the guy that was training me handed me that book. And he was the first one that said, pay yourself first. Regardless of anything else, the secret to accumulating money is pay yourself first before anything else. And what he was saying is save. Save. Before you do anything else, pay yourself first. And then everything else goes on top of that. That was in that book. And he had accumulated a good deal of money. And I devoured that book. It's a simple little book. But read and get your kids to read. Read about money. I mean, it's the thing that it's about everything in life revolves around that in a lot of ways. You look at how much it impacts our lives. Now, that said, I'm going to wrap this up. We've got plenty more to say, and if you are interested in learning more, I strongly recommend that you join us for Financial Peace University. It's a 10-week or a 9-week course. We're going to do 10 with an introductory thing to get everybody assimilated, but it's 9 weeks. It used to be 13, but they've cut it down, condensed it down to 9 weeks. So you can imagine they're 2-hour sessions. I've been here about an hour. There's so much more, from insurance to how to invest to just college funding, things like that. You're going to hear all sorts of things. You're going to hear a lot of different stories too. What people have, what they're doing or not doing. But I really recommend looking into that. And if you want more information, you go to brightcc.org to sign up. brightcc.org. Or you can email me at God's Mighty Warriors. That's God's, plural, God's Mighty Warriors at hotmail.com if you want more information. Be happy to and I'll answer your questions too if you haven't. And I'm going to tell you right now, there are a lot of ways out there. I can take you to the bookstore and show you other books. I know Rick Edelman, when I first started teaching Financial Peace, there were 2 books on the New York Times bestsellers list. They were diametrically opposed. One was Rick Edelman's book and one was Dave Ramsey's. Edelman said that you should pull all the equity out of your house and invest it. And there's a good school of thought on that. And that was in around 2000 when he was writing that book. And then here at 2008, 9, 10, a lot of people were upside down in their homes. They lost their homes because they had taken all the equity out and the market collapsed. So I'm not saying that can't work, but I'll just say there are a lot of ways to skin the cat. I recommend Financial Peace. I recommend that program. I recommend that for a vast majority of people. Millions of people have gone through it. If you're not listening to him on the radio, I recommend you might check out his syndicated broadcast. But if you want to take Financial Peace, again, it'll be 10 weeks starting February 23rd, and you can go to brightcc.org to sign up, or you can email me at the address I just gave you. And I appreciate you listening. This is a topic I'm passionate about, as you can probably tell, mostly because I want people to be free. It's just a tragedy what I see. You don't have to live that way. There is an alternative. We can help, and I'd love to. Thanks for listening, and I want to thank our sponsors again, Quality Auto Mart. They're just a great group of people over there. Casey's Outdoor Solutions and 4Speed on 50 Diner. If you would patronize them, we would really appreciate it. Thanks for listening.
Strong Dads wants to thank Quality Auto Mart and Service for being a proud sponsor of the Strong Dads podcast. Started in 1985 and going strong for all these years. Recently, Quality Auto Mart has transitioned from owners of Mark and Nancy Repke to longtime employee Fred and Lorraine Venus. For all your automotive needs and golf cart needs, check out Quality Auto Mart, located across from Indian Lakes on Highway 46 outside of Batesville, Indiana. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.